Hey there, folks. Very, very, very exciting guest in a moment. I have to tell you, kind of a big deal. Steve Deace, whether you know him or don't, let me tell you, he posted something on X, which was an answer to prayer. It was a detailed posting of where we are with satanic forces trying to rip apart the MAGA movement. That's actually what it is. He talked about everything. And I'm going to have him as my guest in a second to dig into it, because we are in really, really divided times. Now, today, I just voted. It's Tuesday, November 4th. Whatever happens in New York, that's another story we'll talk about another time. Right now, we're going to talk about what's going on in the United States of America. I just want to be real clear. Jesus was a Jew. He didn't start a new religion. He was the fulfillment of the Old Testament, the fulfillment of it, right? We'll get into all those details in just a moment. Stay tuned. Hey there, folks. I warned you, my guest, Steve Deace, will be with us in seconds, and here he is. Promises made, promises kept. Steve Deace, thrilled to have you today of all days.
Good to see you, brother. Thank you very much for having me. You bet.
Well, you did people like me a big favor by posting what you posted on X, because you thought through brilliantly, incisively, where we are in the MAGA movement, and you just laid it all out in a way that I know I could not have done. So thank you for that. I reposted most of what you put up there. Let's just jump into it. I mean, let me start here, and you can respond. Okay. We can discuss Israel. We can discuss, blah, 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 blah. Here is the bright red line. Tucker platformed Nick Fuentes, who is one of the very rare actual racist hate mongers, actual Jew-hating anti-Semite, animated by satanic forces. Nobody could be saying what Nick Fuentes has been saying over the years without being in league with the devil. Now, it's my prayer as a Christian, my hope, that he would repent. But right now, for Tucker to have done that is despicable, shocking, absolutely shocking. I cannot imagine why Tucker would have done something like that. I love Tucker. So I cannot imagine how he could have done something this divisive and destructive to the nation, to the MAGA movement. So I'll leave it there. What do you think?
Well, let me address that first, and then I think we should take a step back and make sure that our audiences understand why we're what the ecosystem we're operating in really is, and the tensions that are at play. But just for the very specific situation you mentioned, I like the fact that you used the term, Eric, platforming. In the 1950s, at the advent of the television era, Mike Wallace did a lot of great black and white interviews. You can go watch a lot of those on YouTube with a lot of people that were considered controversial, that could not get past the quote unquote gatekeepers in the newspaper, radio industries, and gain audiences. But he did real interviews. You really got to see what some of these people, and some of them were unfairly maligned, and some of them, like the great interview he did with Margaret Sanger, deserved all of the blowback they got. But that came out in the interview, in that he challenged their belief systems and worldviews. That is not what went on here, by and large, with Tucker. That wasn't an interview. You're right. That was a platforming. That was an attempt to pasteurize him. That was an attempt to whitewash and mainstream him. And I just think we have to accept that. For those of us that admire and love Tucker, I know I'm not a fan of saying that. And Tucker's done kindness to me in my career, and I'll address that here in a second. But that's what went on. And I think that to me, when you have less in-person empathy for Ted Cruz than you do Nick Fuentes, there's just really no moral justification for that in any civic context whatsoever. And I think,
go ahead. When you say that, right, this is where I get utterly baffled, okay? Because, listen, I was kind of upset when Charlie went on Gavin Newsom's podcast. I thought, why are you giving oxygen to this, really deceptive, self-serving swine? But Charlie challenged him. Charlie represent, so yeah, so it It was, I think, positive. Same thing with when Dinesh D'Souza debated Nick Fuentes. He didn't say, yeah, let's hear what you have to say. He pushed him. He pushed him. Now, even that to me is on the line. But what Tucker did, I find it genuinely inexplicable. Do you have any idea how he could do something like this? And because think about it, Tucker is right now, he has put TPUSA in such a bad spot. He put the Heritage Foundation. Kevin Roberts is a great guy. He has put them in a horrible spot. He ought to publicly either distance himself from what he just did or say, I'm leaving Heritage and I'm not going to speak at TPUSA. That would be the generous thing for him to do, the right thing for him to do. So the fact that he is letting everybody twist in the wind, I am absolutely baffled. I don't understand it.
One thing I learned early in my career is I suck at the psychoanalysis business, and my wife is a Liberty grad Christian counselor, and I leave that to her. Right? What I am good at, what the Lord did gift me at is deducing situations and surmising strategically how we got here and where to go from here. And one thing I can say to your audience is that in the last month of his life, Charlie asked me to join him in a private one-on-one signal chat. And this chat was specifically for him and I to put our combined heads and IQs together on how to devise and deploy a strategy to make sure that the likes of Nick Fuentes, Groypers, and any future, imitators and impersonators would never gain a legitimate foothold in our movement whatsoever. Not only did Charlie think that just morally God would never bless a movement that mainstream this, but he also just thought in practicum, very practically, it would dissolve our coalition, it would fracture it and schism it, and we can't afford that. And you saw some of the mustard seeds of what Charlie feared. You saw play out here over the last 6 days. And I think before we go further, let me do this. I think I am confident in this. There are 4 tensions at play that I think will help your audience understand why some people have reacted to this the way they haven't reacted to this the way they have, and really what is at stake based on what is happening here. Number one is a very political, practical calculation. Right now, what you saw is people with more traditional conservative views, our conservative Jewish friends, all rightly came out and condemned this interview. And that's what Charlie feared, that this would fracture the coalition that way. But I need to also warn about this. If you try to cancel Tucker at this juncture, I absolutely believe it risks fracturing our coalition the other way. And let me explain why. We have received people like, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, Tim Pool. And these are people, Tim Pool started out as an operation, with one of those, what was it? I can't even remember. During the Tea Party years, Wall Street or whatever that was, leftists, right? Occupy Wall Street. Thank you. There's a lot of people that have grown the ranks of our voter rolls and movement that we would not have won this last election without, that come from the left. That means they also have some of the left's baggage and issues where Israel is concerned, and they bring that with them. Donald Trump would not be president today without the support of those people to do things like join Israel in blowing up and obliterating Iran's nuclear arsenal. And so I'm not drawing a moral calculation, Eric, but there is a political calculation. Morally, I'm on the side of that's a red line. But politically, to instantly say, well, we're going to cancel people who do this, understand you now risk fracturing our coalition in the opposite direction.
Do what? There's nothing wrong with criticizing Israel. There's nothing wrong with any of that. Giving a platform to an evil, genuine hate monger like Nick.
I agree.
That the fact that
I agree. What Tucker did there is reprehensible, and he put that mess in all of our laps. We all now have to talk about this because of what he did. I agree.
But he hasn't.
But that brings me
about it. He clearly up to this point doesn't care enough to say, to distance himself. To say, in other words, the least he could do is say, I won't speak at TPUSA, or I'll take my name off the Heritage thing, or he could admit that what he did was incredibly damaging to the country. So that's why I don't understand why he would do such a thing. You know, a lot of people have been asking lately, how can we bless Israel? Well, my friends at Artsa Box have found a beautiful, tangible way to do exactly that. Every Artsa Box is filled with handcrafted treasures from the land where Jesus walked.
Like a hope necklace with the Star of David and the map of Israel, delicious Israeli spices and recipes, and a ceramic dish made by a group on the Gaza border that employs youth with disabilities and so much more. They're only selling this box for 6 more days, and it's almost sold out. And right now you can get 15% off with code Metaxas. So if you're a Christian who loves Israel, or you know someone who does, this is the perfect way to experience and share the beauty, faith, and hope of the Holy Land. Go to artsabox.com/Metaxas and get yours today.
I mean, he's the one that exposed these fault lines. Absolutely. If you're one of those people that's concerned that we didn't talk about Arctic frost last week, well, go to Tucker. He could have talked about Arctic frost. He chose to talk to Nick Fuentes instead. This brings me to the second tension, which is Fuentes. We are facing the specter of a younger generation now that we have to win over. And this was one of Charlie's prime directives, was the next generation of young men, as you know. And they are rejecting the conventions of the previous generations that left this mess in their laps. Some of the rejections they're right about, some of the rejections they're wrong about, but the ones we think they're wrong about, we have to win them over. If we say right now that if you're canceled, if you dare broach these subjects, we are going to drive scores more young men into the laps of Nick Fuentes, I promise. Think about when you were their age. If you wanted me to listen to your rap or your hard rock album, have Tipper Gore put a warning sticker on it. Guaranteed I'd go buy it and listen to it every time. All right. You wanted me to look at your magazine, put a plastic wrap around it with the girl on the cover to make sure that I can't see what's inside. Makes me want to see it. It's what Paul says about the law. The law makes me sin. It brings up the sinful nature. And when you expose what I can't do, it makes me want to do it more. Okay. And so we have to beat Nick Fuentes and not him specifically, because I agree. He is a slanderer of his true father, the enemy, the devil. He is a slanderer. He's a liar, and he does so in the most cruel terminology absolutely possible, just like the enemy does. But the ideology he represents, we have to beat it in the arena of ideas. If we don't, if we instantly say you cannot debate these things at all, we are gonna grow Nick Fuentes' audience for him, I fear, more than he could ever do on his own.
Well, look,
that's the
second
second tension.
One thing I haven't said, okay? Nick Fuentes despised Charlie Kirk. He was so
Correct.
jealous, bitterly jealous of Charlie Kirk. He despised him. So it's really not complicated. If you have to choose between Charlie and Nick Fuentes, is it complicated? This is not to say that Nick Fuentes or Adolf Hitler don't once in a while say something that I agree with, but I have to reject them. And Nick Fuentes makes it very easy because he has been so clearly vicious and hateful toward Charlie Kirk, who was my dear friend, who was a profound Christian. Also, Nick Fuentes dares to claim to be a Christian. The devil might as well claim to be a Christian.
100% agree.
It's unbelievable.
100% agree with every word of that.
Those words. And
the third tension we have here, Eric, is personal relationships, and that Tucker has been throughout the course of his career exceedingly kind and gracious to many people in our movement and industry, myself included. And that plus that tension comes with the tension we always feel as Christians when it comes to living, when mercy has to triumph over judgment, as Paul says. How far do you go in extending people to, before you say, hey, I kicked the dust off my sandals? And this is the difference in a covenant of law compared to a covenant of grace. And for example, a few months ago, Tucker gave Lee Strobel, who was instrumental in my own conversion 20 years ago, gave him one of the largest platforms to apologize and defend the gospel Lee has ever had. All right. Lee gave a good friend of mine, Dr. Jeremiah Johnston at Prestonwood Baptist in Dallas, the largest platform he's ever had to defend the Shroud of Turin, for example. All right. And so when you get into personal relationships and these kinds of things, and because Tucker has been kind and gracious, he has not been one of these big stars who's really uppity and arrogant. In fact, I would argue he's displayed more arrogance during this debate in the last year than he's displayed in his entire career for the last 30 plus years. Okay. And so I think people are very conflicted on our side because he has built with his own good deeds a lot of goodwill with a lot of people in our ranks. And then the fourth tension is
That's the point. That's the point. Now, there's anybody else who had done this, I would not be torn apart inside. But for
Right.
somebody that I love and have admired, who has given me an opportunity on his program to talk about my book, Is Atheism Dead? For Tucker to do it, that's where my head explodes. I cannot
I agree.
believe somebody would do.
Oh, I've had a gag reflex for about 5 or 6 days because of everything you just said. Believe me. I mean, I wasn't sure. Am I getting the stomach bug, or is this thing making me want to throw up on the, pretty much on a constant basis? The fourth tension, and this is the most cynical of them all. But if you've got a double-digit IQ, you can see that all the social media algorithms absolutely fund and fuel anti-Semitic tropes. It's a huge way to grow, to express Zionist skepticism, Israeli skepticism, Jewish skepticism, not outright hatred. And I think so much of our business and industry is at the mercy of the algorithm. And I think a lot of people have been silent, frankly, about this because their livelihoods and their business models are threatened by the algorithm. And it's very clear. I mean, listen, you go look at my social media following. Right now, I've got a top 20 show overall on the entire religion spirituality category on iTunes, one of the largest categories in the entire podcast sphere. And yet, go look at my YouTube followings and Twitter followings or X followings compared to all the shows in my peer group, and they're all bigger than mine. Why? Well, because I violated the code of ethics in pushing back on the scamdemic, and I don't play along and go after the anti-Semitic tropes. So I've got 2 strikes against me in Silicon Valley. And so much of this is with literal livelihoods based on how many engagements and stuff can I generate. And I think that's another reason why that you're seeing people be very quiet right now. And I think those 4 tensions are all coming to play in response to this moment.
Well, I just have to say, when I became a born-again believer in 1988, one of the things that was communicated to me pretty quickly is if you love Jesus, you love Israel. Now, the question is, what does that mean? And there are a lot of people, and I honestly think they're not that bright, or they don't know how to think. They're very sloppy. They're illogical. And when you say something like, we love Israel, they automatically assume that means a whole bunch of things it doesn't mean. Okay? When I say I love Israel, that doesn't mean I think it's okay not to believe Jesus is the Messiah. But we have to hold certain things in tension. And there are some people, they seem unable to do that. They really seem to grab onto something, and they'll let it take them like a millstone to the bottom of the ocean. They don't seem to be able to understand that these things are a little bit complicated. And so I'm fascinated right now to see people who they seem to think that lifting up the name of Christ means denouncing Jews. So we have to be clear. Christianity is a Jewish religion. There's no way around it. Jesus was a Jew. Mary was a Jew. Joseph was a Jew. Matthew, Mark, John, they were all Jews. It was a Jewish movement, and Jesus is the Jewish Messiah. We do not throw away the Old Testament. The Old Testament is our Bible as much as the New Testament is our Bible. So again, we have to hold these things in some tension, but there's some people who don't want to do that. And I want to be clear, because I wrote a book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I am well aware of who tried to do this in the 1930s, who tried to say, let's get rid of the Old Testament, and we have a new religion which is somehow anti-Jewish. Completely wrong. Bonhoeffer heroically, prophetically was out there saying that is wrong, but that is a siren song. That is very tempting for people who don't seem personally to know the Lord. They have a lot of stuff in their head. They think that makes them Christians. And we're seeing that right now, and I find it chilling.
Well, I think there's three reasons for everything you just said being correct. And you mentioned my X thread at the start of our conversation. It's why I started my thread where I did. To take a step back, how did we get here? We have skipped an entire generation of fathers, collectively. There's always a remnant, as God says to Elijah, right? As he flees from Jezebel. There's always a remnant, okay? But collectively, as a society, we have skipped an entire generation of fathers in the home, either literally or figuratively. Why does that matter? Because much of the logic center of a child's brain is going to be formed by the dad in the home, since since the male side of the species tends to think more logic-based than nurturing and emotion-based. That's number one. And then number two, the church collectively, pretty much from the first generation of the religious right, when Francis Schaeffer, D. James Kennedy, Jerry Falwell Sr., when those guys left the stage and God called them home, between them and now, collectively the church, with a few exceptions like my buddy Jack Hibbs, with a few exceptions, collectively the church put on Hawaiian shirts and sweater vests and just punted of the discipleship business. And we've been operating under the triumvirate papacy of Joel Osteen and Tim Keller and Rick Warren ever since. Okay. And so people, the reason why that matters so much with Christianity is we've both used the word tension so many times already, Eric. Christianity is a paradoxical religion. All right. I die to live. I lose to win. Okay. I suffer for others. All right. I give because it's better to receive. These are paradoxes that go against our human nature. Without rightly dividing of the word, true discipleship in the churches, we are going to strike. It demands critical thinking, Christianity does, to live this level of paradox. That Jesus is Lord, but we don't live in the fullness of his lordship quite yet. We cannot master these paradoxes without Bible-based discipleship. And collectively, the church has vacated that space. And so all these old first century fallacies that the church confronted, these sort of Gnostic, Arius kind of heresies, are all coming back again, okay, because the church has just abandoned the intellectual space. And then the third thing is, if we're just being really honest, so we just had Reformation Day, commemoration of Martin Luther on All Hallows Eve, going out October 31st, 1517, and nailing his 95 Theses to the door. So there's a reason why the History Channel's top two people of the millennium were Martin Luther and Johannes Gutenberg in 1999. Because those two basically, saved Western civilization. The difference between a John Wycliffe, who's a name not a lot of people other than Theo nerds know, and a Martin Luther is Johannes Gutenberg. In fact, I would argue this last election, Trump is a very Luther-like figure, and Musk, with what he did with Twitter, was the Gutenberg.
Okay,
all right?
now,
All right?
I've never heard anyone say what you just said, except for me. I have been saying that since my book on Luther came out. Not kidding. Since my book on Luther came out, I have been saying that Luther, as I did my research on Luther and wrote my book on Luther, which, by the way, folks, I recommend, there is no doubt that he was a Trumpian kind of figure for reasons I won't go into right now. And X, back then called Twitter, was the equivalent of Gutenberg. It made it possible to do an end run around the elites, around those who had monopolized the information and news, to do an end run around them, to get to speak directly to the people. And it was a revolution, a game changer. Go ahead.
Correct. And so if the Catholic Church is credited with creating what we call today Western civilization, I would argue the Protestant Reformation saved it, that it was dying through the course of the plagues and the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages. And what Luther did, there's no United States of America, at least not as it was founded, without the Protestant Reformation.
Excuse me.
Now, here's the
I hate to constantly be plugging my books, but the book I'm working on right now on the American Revolution, what you just said, I always kind of knew this. It couldn't be more true. There is no United States of America, not a chance, not a ghost of a chance, without the Protestant Reformation, the Puritans, and all of those, particularly in Boston, who gave birth to the idea of independence and revolution, were inescapably motivated by the Protestant Reformation. We can talk about that another time, but it could not be more true, and I am daily doing the research, and I'm astonished at how clear that is.
Well, because you needed the only spiritual framework that lined up with the Enlightenment thinkers like Locke, Hobbes, Montesquieu, and others that put a lot of emphasis on individual agency. The only theological framework that would symbiote with that is the Protestant framework, the individual relationship with God that puts a high emphasis on autonomy and agency of the individual. But now we're getting nerdy. Okay. But as much as we're all here because of what Luther did in his bravery, at the end of his life, Luther wrote some things that about Jews that if I said who wrote this, Martin Luther or Nick Fuentes, you wouldn't tell the difference. Well, maybe in the IQ level you would, okay, but fundamentally not much different. And this has been a tension really within Christianity since it became a primarily Gentile led religion. Pretty much since the apostles died, there has been a constant strain of pushback. For example, Jonathan Edwards. There's probably not a United States of America without Jonathan Edwards. He was the heart and soul of the Great Awakening. All right. And he also, by the way, under Tucker's definition, would be considered a Christian Zionist, even though he was a postmillennial, because he also believed there would be a future nation of Israel. And that's how God would complete the covenant with the Jewish people at the end of the age. But Edwards also had a lot of the same medieval era tropes about Jews that Luther did. All right. And so there's always been this kind of dance with the abyss of anti-Semitism within the Christianity's always had to fight and push back against since it became a largely Gentile-led religion. So if you throw that historical trend into skipping an era of dads teaching kids how to think logically in the home and modeling that, on top of a lack of a generation of men in the pulpit discipling people so they can actually be critical thinkers and understand words like nuance and paradox and how to put them into practice, you put all that into a witch's brew, into a giant cauldron, Eric, and then you add social media to it, where I can show everybody and be how proud, how retarded I truly am on a regular basis. All right, you throw that all in together, brother, and you end up with the absolute vomit called debate culture that we have today, which isn't much of a debate at all, but really a whole bunch of people that want to show you they've got double-digit IQs and they're very proud of it.
Hey there, folks. All across America, something is stirring, a hunger for truth, for scripture, for the story of Jesus. And this November, you can experience that story on the big screen. From CBN Films and Fathom Entertainment comes Oracles of God, the story of the New Testament. A powerful new documentary reveals how the Gospels and letters of the New Testament were first written, preserved, and passed down to us, the most influential book in history. Directed by four-time Emmy nominee Aaron Zimmerman, Oracles of God brings history and faith together through stunning visuals, expert insight, and the extraordinary story of how God's Word survived and changed the world. Don't miss this exclusive Fathom event, November 2nd, 3rd, and 5th only in select theaters nationwide. Visit fathomevents.com to find a theater near you. Get your tickets today. Before the Bible was bound, truth was written. Visit fathomevents.com. You know, it's very interesting you say this because I keep talking about my book on the revolution. One of the things that astonished me, and John Adams writes about this very explicitly in the 1760s. He writes an amazing essay in 1765. Nobody seems to know about it. I'm going to write about a whole chapter on it in my book. But he makes very clear that at the heart of liberty, at the heart of sustaining liberty, at the heart of the Christian faith, is this idea, which again, you can see this from Luther, we all need to be able to read the Bible and we need to understand it. And so he talks in 1765 about how when the Puritans came over here on the Arbella in 1630, John Winthrop, they immediately said, we have to establish a college. They established Harvard College 4 years later. They established grammar schools in every town in Massachusetts Bay Colony because they knew that ignorance is used by Satan. In order to defeat
Correct.
Satan, we need learning, we need education, we need to train people to use their minds correctly, and that is exactly what you've been talking about.
Yes. No one can, one of the, I've got, Rush used to have his undeniable truths of life. And I've got a handful of creeds that we refer to on our show on a regular basis. And one of them is this: no one can rise above their own worldview. And another one is just like it. Worldview is destiny. You look at somebody like Joe Rogan, for example. You can see Joe Rogan is what the Democratic Party was in the 80s and 90s. And so why did he leave California? He went to Texas so there would be some protection around the excesses of what Democrats in California don't have any, boundaries whatsoever. They can do whatever they want. But look where he moved in Texas, Austin. He went to Austin. So he went to a way more conservative state, but he chose the most liberal city in the same state. Why? Because he acted on his own worldview. Joe is basically the kind of liberal Democrat that Democrats were in the 80s and 90s. I said this last election we had in 24, Eric, and you're a New Yorker, you'll appreciate this, that the choice between Trump and Kamala was, do you want New York City when Rudy was mayor? You want America to look like that? A little bit, still more left wing than, frankly, people like me and you would want, but way more sane than what we currently have. All right. Do you want America to look like what New York City looked like in the 90s when Rudy was mayor, or do you want it to look like what it looks like now? That was really the election. Kamala was New York City today versus Trump, New York City 30, 40 years ago. That was really the election. All right. We cannot rise above our own worldview. The Bible says it this way: as a man thinketh, so is he. Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. All right. We cannot rise above our own worldview. And so if the church has vacated, really since Schaeffer and especially since Colson, has largely vacated the worldview space in this culture, those worldviews are going to get formed regardless of whether the church is in the worldview business. They're just going to get formed away and outside the church. And we're living in this generational harvest now. All the stuff that when we were growing up listening to Rush or listening to Mark Levin or Glenn Beck, all right, when we were growing up and coming of age politically, all the stuff that those first generation of people in our business all warned about and all said, hey, if we don't fix this, we're going to end up in blank. We're living in that period now. We're living in the harvest and the fulfillment of that period now.
In your X postings, because you posted a bunch of real fantastic thread. I hope everybody reads it. If you follow me on X, you'll see it because I reposted most of it. One of the things you talk about, and this gets to the heart of Charlie Kirk, he was telling people the most countercultural thing you could say in this day and age, after 50 plus years after the sexual revolution: get married young. If you're a young man, pray that God send you the woman that you want to spend the rest of your life with, raising a beautiful family, have a bunch of kids. What a wildly countercultural idea. Love one woman. God created every man to love one woman and to have a family with that woman. It's a beautiful thing. And the opposite of that is Nick Fuentes, who, like Andrew Tate, seems to hate women. And let me tell you something. There are hateful things about a lot of women, and there are hateful things about a lot of men. And what Satan wants to do is to divide men from women and to say, oh, you've got to choose one or the other. Who's hurt you the most? You hate them. God wants men and women created in his image to work together for God's purposes. And so this is another way that you can divide, ladies and gentlemen. Are the voices you listen to, are they lifting up the opposite sex in a loving way? Are the women you listen to lifting up men in an honoring way? Are the men you listen to lifting up women in an honoring way? When I think of women, I think of my mother, I think of my wife, I think of my daughter. The idea that somebody like a Nick Fuentes would speak in such an unbelievably vile way about women, ladies and gentlemen, that is wrong. That is like trying to murder your mother and your grandmother and your sister. And if you bought into that, that is Satan. That is the voice of Satan. And so that's another clear division right now. And that's why, Charlie's memory is so sacred to me, because he was countercultural in saying marriage is a gift from God. Get married. Don't believe the lies of the culture. Get married. Have a family. That's just wildly countercultural. And by the way, if you're a young man, that will bless you. That will help you.
Listen, I mean, Satan hates women. He hated Eve especially so. The seed of the woman, okay? All right? And what's the seed of the woman that is in that, proto-evangelion there? All right? The Messiah that would come forward and crush his head. The incredible scene in Mel Gibson's Passion where James Caviezel's Christ is pleading in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then when he finally accepts the mission to be the lamb slain before the foundation of the world, and he sees that androgynous, he finally looks at that androgynous Satan character, and wow, was Mel prophesying with that, by the way, way ahead of his time. The androgynous, trans, satanic Satan figure in the garden there tempting him, all right? And he ignores him, and when he finally accepts to take the cup of wrath on our behalf, and the way Caviezel looks over, and that little snake that had been crawling around his ankles, and he crushes his I mean, the hair on the back of my neck stands up every time I think of that scene, because that's right out of the scriptures. That's the first gospel, the proto-evangelion. And so the idea of tormenting women, that is uniquely something that Satan gets sadistic satisfaction out of. It's why his pagan religions are all matriarchal, and it's why they always turn women into basically prostitutes every single time, and debases the women, because he hates the women, that the women may bring forth the seed, the daughter of Eve that'll bring forth the seed that'll crush his heel. And so you're touching on that, and Fuentes is the embodiment of that. And let me just add this too. Do you know what the number one marker is on how someone's going to vote today? It's actually not religion. In fact, if you look at evangelical status of people who are non-white, Democrats get all kinds of evangelical votes of non-white evangelicals. The number one line of demarcation in how someone votes today is marital status. That's the number one line of demarcation.
Wow. That's amazing. That is amazing.
If you are married, you are way more likely to vote our way than if you're not. The Democratic Party is essentially a party that's anti-family and the promotion of perpetual adolescence and singleness. I mean, that's their core demographic and ideology.
And I'll say this too, just throw this in. If you're a young man, if you want to be blessed throughout your life, pray that God send you a wife. And by the way, how will that bless you? It blesses you by sanctifying you. When you lay down your life for God, and you lay down your life for your wife and your kids, that makes a better man of you. You're not just a better man in doing that. In doing that, it makes you a better man. You learn to think more clearly, to think more the way Jesus wants us to think. It's an amazing thing. And so I just want to say that, again, you have a clear choice, that either Charlie Kirk or Nick Fuentes, either Charlie Kirk
Correct.
or Andrew Tate. It couldn't be more clear, which gets us back to the beginning of the program, where I just have to say, I love Tucker, and it really breaks my heart that he did this, because I could disagree with all kinds of people on a lot of stuff. But in doing that, he went, over the cliff. And it's my prayer and my hope that he would understand that he's done something. I mean, again, you said, you're not good at psychoanalyzing people, and neither am I. I don't understand what got into him that he thought that was a good idea, but it was as divisive and destructive as anything I've seen in American public life. Candace Owens is another story. And listen, folks, I want to be clear. Somebody like Candace Owens, she can be saying a lot of stuff that's true, but she can still be leading people in a bad direction. That's normally what happens. I mean, when Adolf Hitler got up there, he didn't say, hey, I worship the devil and I believe in murder. Right. And he's not going to say that. He's going to say a lot of stuff that German people would say, you know what? He's right. Nobody else is saying that. I'm following him. And he led them in a satanic direction. And I think Candace Owens, wittingly or unwittingly, is doing that. And so we're living through some tough times. And so we've got to make some tough choices.
Well, let me say this, because it sounds like we're kind of coming to the end of it. So let me leave your audience with something that will help them as kind of a Rosetta Stone moving forward, because we kind of are in an era where we kind of do have to question everything. We're in a deep generational hole that we have to dig out of. We have to reassess completely the way on the right we have conducted political affairs pre-Trump, because post-Trump, we're not going to be able to rely on his personality and force of nature to just carry our sorry carcasses across the finish line every day that ends in Y. We're going to have to actually be a real movement moving after he's done. And he's going to be done sooner than people think. All right. These years go by fast. And so we do need this reassessing. And I don't want to be seen as saying, no, don't ask questions. I want us to be the people who have answers that aren't afraid of questions. But let me say this, though. What is the difference between, here's the thing, that's Christianity is not a perpetual asking of questions. Christianity is not we're just asking questions. That's Satan. Christianity is the perpetual, ceaseless seeking of answers. All right? Do the people that are questioning everything that you follow, are they bringing you to the answers, or are they just questioning everything? Are they just planting never-ending doubt in your mind?
And that is what, to some extent, Tucker, and to a larger extent, Candace, they hide behind that. I'm just asking questions. Folks, I don't know who said it, probably Chesterton, that, the whole idea of opening your mind, having an open mind, is so that eventually you can close it on something that's true and
Right.
real.
That sounds like something Chesterton would say.
Right.
Yes.
And the other thing
Yes.
is that you see these people that they're always saying like, oh, I see through this or I see through that. Well, the whole point of seeing through stuff is a point that you would actually see something. When you see through stuff,
to point you to something.
that you're not
to
only
something.
endlessly seeing through things and seeing nothing. And so that's
Right.
part of where we are right now. And that's a great word, Steve. Very important that we're able to discern. Because when people just say, "Oh, I'm just asking questions," at some
Eric, people can never forget this. When truth incarnate came to the earth, it looked us in the eye and said, ask, seek, knock. Truth wants to be found. God can't make that any plainer. We're heading into Christmas season, than leaving the kingdom of heaven to put himself in the most vulnerable position in our species, a human child completely dependent on sinful parents for everything. And God did that to be known, to be known. Truth wants to be known. So yes, ask questions, but to seek answers. If you're finding that your asking of questions is paralyzing you from action or paralyzing you from critical thinking, that is not faith. That is darkness. We are not here to perpetually ask questions, but perpetually seek answers.
Beautiful. Steve Deace, just a joy to have you on the program. And as much a joy to have you in this world and to have your voice of sanity and reason and the love of Christ in the world. Very grateful for you, Steve. Thanks for being my guest today.
Thank you, brother. Same to you, and God bless. Always good to see you, Eric.
This Christmas, as we celebrate the Super Centennial coming up, Super Centennial 250th, there's no way, better way to support it than by supporting my friend, an American hero, Mike Lindell. He's one of the main sponsors on this program. He's the man behind My Pillow. He put his money where his mouth is. Some of you know this if you've watched the program. He stood up for the country. He was unfairly canceled by the big box stores. So I want us to stand with him. So please go to mypillow.com. Use the promo code ERIC to save big on pillows, sheets, slippers, everything you need for Christmas comfort. You'll sleep great, save big, celebrate freedom with My Pillow. Mypillow.com. Use the code ERIC.